Tonight we're stepping onto a vaca, a Polynesian double-hulled canoe, not in some sun-drenched, postcard-perfect future, but right now. You feel the gentle sway beneath your bare feet, the salt spray kissing your face, and the vast, boundless Pacific stretching out before you. There's no GPS, no compass, not even a map that makes a lick of sense to modern eyes. Just you, a handful of incredibly brave, or perhaps incredibly foolhardy, ancestors, and the boundless ocean. You probably won't survive this journey if you're relying on your smartphone for directions. This isn't just a trip. It's a profound connection to a past where humanity truly learned to read the subtle whispers of the world. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the deck, the sun a fiery orb sinking towards the horizon, painting the clouds in hues of orange and purple. The air is warm, humid, and carries the faint scent of wood and ocean. You notice, as your eyes scan the vast expanse, that the clouds aren't just random fluffy things, they hold secrets. To the ancient Polynesians, these weren't just water vapor, they were signposts, celestial maps etched in the sky. You learn to discern the difference between a cumulus cloud, a fluffy cotton ball shape that often signals fair weather and calm seas, and the more ominous cumulonimbus, those towering thunderheads that promise a good drenching and perhaps a rather exciting read, terrifying ride. It's like learning a new language, but instead of words, you're reading the sky's intentions. You see how the setting sun illuminates the underside of a cloud, casting a bright sheen on its base. That bright spot, you're told, is the reflection of a distant lagoon, an atoll, an island that lies far beyond your line of sight. It's an optical trick, a mirage made real by the interaction of light and atmosphere, and it's a vital clue in the vast puzzle of the Pacific. You might wonder how they figured this out. Did someone just happen to be looking at a cloud one day and think, "Hey, that looks like my living room light just bounced off the neighbor's pool"? Probably not that precise, but it was a process of generations of observation, trial, and error. Imagine the first time a navigator pointed to a seemingly empty horizon, declaring, "There's an island there," based solely on a cloud's glow. What an incredible leap of faith and understanding. It's like discovering that your cat can predict rain, but on a much grander, life-or-death scale. You're taught to observe the subtle color shifts in the clouds, the varying textures. A cloud that appears whiter, brighter, often indicates the presence of shallower water below, reflecting more sunlight. Darker, grayer clouds could mean deeper ocean, or perhaps approaching squalls. It's not just about the cloud itself, but how it interacts with the light and the sea. You begin to see the sky not as a blank canvas, but as a dynamic, living chart. You learn that certain types of clouds tend to form over islands due to the landmass creating convection currents, lifting warm, moist air that then condenses into visible clouds. These island clouds are often stationary or slow-moving, unlike the fast-scudding clouds of open ocean. It's like having a giant, fluffy arrow pointing directly to your destination. Of course, sometimes those arrows are a bit blurry, or they point to a mirage, which makes things interesting. One historical fact often cited is that the Polynesian navigators were so adept at reading these subtle signs that they could detect islands hundreds of miles away, long before they became visible to the naked eye at sea level. This wasn't guesswork. It was a highly developed science passed down through oral traditions and practical apprenticeship. The debate among historians sometimes centers on just how much of this knowledge was truly scientific, in a modern sense versus an intuitive, almost spiritual connection to nature. Were they calculating angles and distances in their heads, or were they simply feeling their way across the ocean with an incredible depth of accumulated wisdom? You find yourself leaning towards a bit of both. It's a bit like trying to explain to someone how you just know your toast is done without looking at a timer. You just have a feeling. Except here, the stakes are considerably higher than slightly burnt breakfast. You also discover that birds are your allies. Not just any birds, mind you, but specific species that fly out to sea in the morning to feed and return to land in the evening. You watch them, their tireless wings beating against the vast blue. A lone frigate bird soaring high might be an RLY indicator, but it's the sheer volume, the consistent direction of their flight, that tells the true story. You learn to distinguish between a bird simply taking a scenic tour and one on a determined flight path back to its nest. It's like watching a rush hour commute from above, but instead of cars, it's feathered commuters. These feathered guides, coupled with cloud observations, form a powerful combination. It's a testament to how every element of their environment was integrated into their navigation system. No wasted information, no overlooked detail. Every ripple, every gust of wind, every cloud, every bird, every piece of sea foam, it all contributes to the grand narrative of where you are and where you're going. The sheer observational skill required for this life is staggering. You wonder if, in your own life, you've missed 1,000 tiny clues simply because you weren't looking or perhaps weren't taught how to see. It makes you feel a little less capable and a little more appreciative of their ingenuity. It's like trying to navigate a bustling city without Google Maps, just by looking at the pigeons and the reflections in skyscraper windows. Sounds a bit insane, doesn't it? Yet they did it, and they did it well. One quirky tidbit about Polynesian navigation is the use of stick charts, or medio charts. These weren't maps in the traditional sense, but rather mnemonic devices made of sticks and shells that represented ocean swells, currents, and island locations. They weren't meant to be used on the water, but rather to teach and memorize the complex patterns of the ocean. Imagine trying to explain the entire internet using only sticks and shells. It's a remarkable example of abstract representation and knowledge transfer. The shells would indicate islands, and the curved sticks would represent the wave patterns that would refract around those islands. It's like a three-dimensional, tactile brain map of the ocean's subtle movements. Historians still argue about the exact interpretation of some of these charts, whether they were highly precise or more conceptual. It's a bit like trying to read someone's messy handwriting from 100 years ago. You get the gist, but the details can be elusive. You try to picture a young Polynesian apprentice, crouched over a stick chart, tracing the invisible lines of the ocean with their finger, committing the rhythm and pulse of the sea to memory. It's a beautiful thought, a testament to a different kind of literacy, one born of ocean and sky. And you realize that your entire understanding of navigation has just been completely turned on its head. Who needs satellites when you have generations of accumulated wisdom etched into your very being, reflected in the clouds above and the foam below? It's truly incredible. You're still on the Vaca, the sun now a memory, replaced by a canopy of stars that feel close enough to touch. But even in the darkness, the Polynesians found their way. Tonight, your lesson turns to the sea foam. You might think sea foam is just, well, foam, the ephemeral residue of waves crashing. But to the expert navigator, it's another crucial piece of the cosmic jigsaw puzzle. You learn that different types of waves produce different kinds of foam. Waves generated by distant storms in the open ocean, the ones with a long, slow swell, tend to produce a fine, uniform foam, almost like lace, that dissipates quickly. These are your deep-sea indicators, the oceanic equivalent of a quiet hum. But then there's the foam that's a direct result of waves breaking over shallow reefs or against land masses. This foam is thicker, more bubbly, and often contains organic matter like algae or bits of coral, and it tends to persist longer. It's the ocean's way of saying, hey, there's something solid over here. It's a bit like the difference between a gentle sigh and a robust burp from the ocean. You begin to actively look for these differences, your eyes adjusting to the faint luminescence of the foam under the starlight. The way the foam behaves also tells a story. If you see foam that seems to be lingering, coalescing in certain patterns, it might indicate a current, a subtle eddy caused by an underwater obstruction or a nearby landmass. It's like reading tea leaves, but instead of tea, it's the ocean's froth. And instead of your fortune, it's your survival. You find yourself squinting into the darkness, trying to discern patterns in the fleeting white. It feels like learning a secret language, one spoken by the very surface of the sea. The Polynesians understood that the ocean was not a uniform entity, but a complex tapestry of currents, swells, and subtle movements. And every single one of those movements left a trace, a whisper on the water's surface. A mainstream historical fact here is that the knowledge of ocean swells and their interaction with islands was so advanced that it formed the basis of those previously mentioned stick charts. These charts weren't depicting the islands themselves, but the way the ocean waves bent and refracted around them. It's like feeling the vibrations through the floorboards to know if someone is walking above you, but on a much grander scale and with water. You're taught about the rebounding swells. Imagine a wave traveling across the open ocean. When it encounters an island, it doesn't just crash and disappear. Instead, a portion of that wave actually reflects off the island and travels back outwards, creating a distinct pattern of interfering waves. These rebounding swells, invisible to the casual observer, create subtle but discernible patterns in the sea foam. It's like tossing a pebble into a pond and watching the ripples bounce off the edge, but imagine doing it on an oceanic scale and being able to read those ripples from miles away. You're told that these patterns are like fingerprints, unique to each island's size and shape. A quirky tidbit: some navigators could even identify specific islands based on the unique feel of these returning swells against the hull of their vaca. It's a sensory experience, a subtle vibration that resonates through the vessel, almost like the ocean is speaking directly to them. This kind of nuanced perception is almost impossible for modern humans to grasp without direct, immersive experience. It's like being able to tell what kind of car is driving past your house just by the sound of its tires on the pavement. You try to concentrate, to feel the subtle shiver in the vaca's hull, but mostly you just feel the regular rocking motion. Your senses are clearly not yet calibrated to this ancient art. The scholarly debate often arises when considering the accuracy of these methods. Were they always perfect? Of course not. The ocean is dynamic and conditions change. But the cumulative effect of all these observations, the clouds, the birds, the swells, the foam, dramatically increased their chances of success. It wasn't one silver bullet, but a finely tuned system of redundancy and cross-referencing. It's like having a dozen different weather apps, and you average their predictions to get the most accurate forecast. You learn that even the color of the sea foam can indicate proximity to land. In some areas, foam near land might pick up sediment or volcanic ash, giving it a slightly different hue than the pure white foam of the open ocean. It's an incredibly subtle difference, but one that could mean the difference between finding sustenance and succumbing to the vastness. You squint, trying to see the subtle off-white tinge your instructor is pointing to. You mostly just see dark water and white foam. Don't worry, they say. Your eyes will adjust. Eventually. You hope they adjust before you run out of dried fish. It's an entirely different way of engaging with the world, one that requires absolute presence and meticulous observation. You can't be distracted by your phone or your thoughts about what you'll have for dinner. Every moment is a lesson, every observation a potential lifesaver. The navigators were essentially living sensors, constantly processing vast amounts of environmental data. It makes you feel a little silly for complaining about your phone's battery life. Imagine navigating for weeks, even months, without a single charge. It's mind-boggling. You consider the immense patience, the years of dedicated learning that went into mastering this art. It wasn't something you just picked up in a weekend course. It was a lifetime commitment, passed down from generation to generation, refined and perfected over centuries. And now, you, a mere novice, are trying to grasp centuries of accumulated wisdom in a few short lessons. It's a bit like trying to learn brain surgery by watching a 5-minute YouTube video. You've got a long way to go, but the beauty of it, the sheer elegance of their system, is undeniable. It's a testament to human ingenuity when pushed to its limits. The stars have begun to fade, giving way to the soft blush of dawn. As the sky lightens, you notice a new element entering your navigational education, the subtle shifts in the color of the ocean itself. You might think the ocean is just blue, right? But just as the clouds speak volumes, so too does the water beneath you. Close to land, especially near coral reefs or shallow lagoons, the water often takes on a lighter, more vibrant turquoise or even a greenish hue. This is due to the interaction of sunlight with the shallower seabed and the presence of marine life. Out in the deep ocean, the water is a profound, almost inky blue, absorbing most of the sunlight. It's like comparing the clear water of a swimming pool to the dark depths of a well. The change isn't abrupt, but a gradual transition, a subtle painting by nature that guides you home. You're taught to scan the horizon not just for land, but for these faint color changes, these whispers of proximity. It's a skill that requires ink, readable visual acuity, especially at dawn or dusk when the light is most forgiving. You're also learning about the subtle undulations of the sea surface, the way the waves behave. Even in seemingly calm conditions, there are swells, those long, rolling movements of the ocean that carry immense power. These aren't wind-generated chop. They are the deep, resonant heartbeat of the ocean. You begin to understand that multiple sets of swells can exist simultaneously, originating from distant storms or prevailing winds. These intersecting swells create a complex pattern on the water's surface, and like the foam, they hold clues. When you approach an island, these swells will refract, bend, and even reflect off the landmass, creating a distinct and often turbulent pattern where the direct swells meet the reflected ones. It's a bit like trying to read Braille with your feet, except the Braille is constantly moving and changing. You feel the subtle shift in the vaca's rhythm, a slight change in the way it rises and falls with the waves. This isn't just uncomfortable, it's information. A mainstream historical fact. The navigators were so skilled at discerning these wave patterns that they could often tell if an island was to port or starboard, even when it was still far out of sight. They weren't just feeling the big waves. They were attuned to the minute, almost imperceptible changes in the water's surface. It's a level of sensory awareness that seems almost superhuman. You try to close your eyes and feel the rhythm of the vaca, to pick out the subtle variations your instructors describe. Mostly, you just feel seasick, but you keep trying, reminding yourself that survival often depends on pushing past discomfort and honing your senses to an entirely new degree. A quirky tidbit is that some navigators were said to be able to smell islands. This isn't a superpower, but rather an acute awareness of subtle atmospheric changes. Land, even small islands, can alter air currents, carry the scent of vegetation, or even affect the humidity. It's a faint, almost imperceptible change, but one that could be picked up by a highly sensitive nose and trained mind. Imagine navigating by sniffing the air like a bloodhound. You wonder if your own sense of smell is capable of detecting anything beyond yesterday's dinner. The scholarly debate sometimes focuses on the extent to which Polynesian navigation was truly scientific versus an art form based on intuitive knowledge passed down through generations. Was there a formal curriculum, or was it more like an apprenticeship where you learned by doing, by observing, by simply being in the environment day after day? You suspect it was a rich blend of both. Formal instruction on the principles, combined with years of practical experience and the development of an almost unconscious understanding. It's like learning to play a musical instrument. You learn the notes and scales, but true mastery comes from intuition and practice. You find yourself appreciating the holistic nature of their approach. There wasn't a single trick or technique. It was a combination of myriad observations, all woven together into a comprehensive system. It's a lot like trying to make a perfect souffle. One wrong ingredient or a slight change in temperature, and it all falls flat. But they consistently made it rise, again and again, across thousands of miles of open ocean. You're also taught about the subtle shifts in cloud formations over the water, especially after a long period of open ocean sailing. Even if you don't see an island cloud directly, a change in the overall cloud pattern, a tendency for clouds to linger in a certain direction, can be an indicator. It's like seeing a slight disturbance in a perfectly smooth blanket. It hints at something underneath. These observations reinforce each other, providing layers of confirmation. If the watercolor is shifting and the swells are behaving differently, and there's a subtle change in the cloud patterns, all pointing in the same direction, your confidence grows exponentially. It's a cumulative effect, a building certainty born from a tapestry of subtle environmental cues. You begin to understand that navigation isn't about rigid measurements, but about a flexible, adaptive reading of the environment. It's a dialogue with nature, a constant exchange of information. And as the sun fully rises, illuminating the vastness around you, you feel a connection to this ancient wisdom, a sense of awe at the human capacity to understand and master their world, even without the tools we take for granted. It's a reminder that sometimes the best technology isn't built, it's learned. The sun is now high, beating down on the vaca. You're learning about the subtle changes in the wind, not just its direction, but its feel, its scent, its very texture. The wind, of course, is crucial for sailing, but to the Polynesian navigator, it was also a vital navigational tool. Near land, particularly large islands, the landmass itself can affect the wind patterns. You might notice a subtle shift in the wind's direction as it interacts with hills or mountains, creating localized breezes or even areas of calm. It's like a giant invisible hand subtly redirecting the airflow. You're taught to feel these subtle changes on your skin, to notice if the wind that was consistently blowing from one direction suddenly veers slightly, or if its strength fluctuates. This isn't just about sailing efficiency. It's about detecting the presence of a landmass that is altering the global wind patterns. It's a bit like detecting a hidden door in a room by feeling the slight draft it creates. You also learn that land can carry scents on the wind. While you might not smell flowers or specific plants from miles away, you might pick up the faint, earthy scent of decaying vegetation, the tang of fresh water, or even the distinctive aroma of certain types of rock. These are subtle, elusive scents, almost too faint to register consciously, but a trained navigator's nose can pick them out. It's like being a sommelier, but instead of wine, you're identifying the vintage of an island's air. You breathe deeply, trying to discern anything beyond the omnipresent saltiness of the ocean. So far, all you smell is your own unwashed clothing and the faint scent of fish from last night's meal. But you persist, trying to fine-tune your olfactory senses to this ancient art. A mainstream historical fact is that some navigators were said to be able to detect the scent of certain types of volcanic rock, an indicator of relatively young, geologically active islands. This level of sensory integration is truly remarkable and speaks to years of practice and intimate connection with their environment. A quirky tidbit: some Polynesian voyagers were believed to have a sense often referred to as wave memory or swell memory. This wasn't about current waves, but the ability to recall and anticipate long-period swells that travel across vast distances. They could theoretically remember the feel of a particular swell from a known island, and then follow that swell back to its source, even weeks or months later. It's like having a permanent, internal GPS tracking system based on oceanic vibrations. Imagine being able to retrace your steps purely by the faint echoes of vibrations in the ground. It's a concept that sounds almost mythical, and historians still debate the precise mechanisms and extent of this ability. Was it a conscious memory, or a subconscious processing of subtle environmental cues? It's a mystery that makes you appreciate the profound depth of their connection to the sea. You try to imagine what it would be like to have your body so attuned to the ocean that it acts as a living, breathing sensor. The scholarly debate often centers on the spiritual aspects of Polynesian navigation. Was it purely empirical science, or was there a significant spiritual or mystical component? Many ancient cultures integrated their understanding of the natural world with their spiritual beliefs. The stars, the ocean, the land, all were seen as interconnected and imbued with sacred meaning. It's possible that their ability to navigate so effectively wasn't just about reading signs, but also about a deep, reverent connection to the forces of nature, a belief that the ocean itself would guide them if they were open to its whispers. You find yourself wondering if, in your modern, cynical world, you've lost something vital by separating science from spirit. Perhaps true understanding comes from embracing both. It's a bit like trying to understand a beautiful poem by only analyzing its grammar and vocabulary, without appreciating its emotional depth. You're also learning about the behavior of marine animals, particularly fish. While birds point to land from above, fish can sometimes indicate proximity to reefs or shallower waters where they feed. You learn to observe not just the presence of fish, but their behavior. Are they schooling, feeding on the surface, or darting in specific directions? Certain species of fish are known to inhabit specific types of environments, so identifying them can be another clue. It's like having a living, breathing sonar system, but instead of sound waves, it's fish behavior. Of course, sometimes fish are just being fish, so you have to be careful not to jump to conclusions based on a single observation. It's a system of accumulated evidence, each piece adding to the overall picture. And as the day wears on and the sun begins its slow descent, you feel the rhythms of the vaka becoming more familiar, the subtle shifts in the wind more noticeable, the faint sense of the ocean beginning to tell their own silent stories. You're not quite a master navigator yet, but you're starting to read the signs, to participate in the ancient dialogue between humanity and the boundless sea. You haven't drowned yet, which, by your earlier estimates, is a definite win. As twilight deepens, casting long shadows across the deck, your attention shifts back to the celestial sphere. While the clouds and sea foam were your daytime guides, the stars are the unwavering beacons of the night. You're now being introduced to the star compass, a sophisticated mental construct used by Polynesian navigators. It's not a physical compass with a needle pointing north, but a system based on the rising and setting points of prominent stars. You learn that each major star or constellation has a specific house on the horizon where it rises and sets. Imagine a giant dome above you, divided into segments, and each segment corresponds to a star. This mental map, memorized through generations, allowed them to hold a constant course, even in the darkest night. It's like having an internal GPS system that uses the entire galaxy as its satellites. You find yourself craning your neck, trying to identify the familiar patterns of the Big Dipper or Orion, only to realize that the constellations look different from these equatorial latitudes. You learn that Polaris, the North Star, isn't always visible or relevant in the southern hemisphere, so navigators relied on other stars like the Southern Cross or the various pointers that indicated true south. This required immense astronomical knowledge, not just of a few bright stars, but of the entire celestial sphere and its movements throughout the night and across the seasons. A mainstream historical fact is that these navigators could identify dozens, if not hundreds, of stars by name and track their precise movements. They knew which stars passed directly over specific islands, essentially creating a celestial latitude line. If you knew that a certain star passed directly overhead your destination, you could simply follow that star's path. It's a bit like following a luminous breadcrumb trail across the ocean. You try to imagine memorizing such a complex map, a feat that makes your struggles with remembering phone numbers seem trivial. A quirky tidbit is the concept of zenith stars. Certain stars, at a specific time of year, would pass directly over a particular island at its zenith, meaning it was directly overhead. For a navigator who knew their destination's zenith star, it was a profound confirmation of their position. It's like having a cosmic spotlight shine down directly on your target. They would simply sail until that star was directly above them at its highest point. Imagine the thrill, the profound sense of confirmation, when you see your guiding star directly overhead after weeks or months at sea. This wasn't just a navigational aid. It was a spiritual connection, a sign from the cosmos that they were on the right path. Historians still debate the precision with which these zenith passages could be observed and utilized, given the subtle shifts in a star's apparent position from a moving vaka. It's a bit like trying to thread a needle while riding a roller coaster, but somehow they did it. The scholarly debate often delves into the mnemonic devices used to memorize this vast amount of celestial information. Were there songs, chants, stories, or specific rituals that helped embed this knowledge into the minds of successive generations of navigators? It's highly likely that oral traditions played a crucial role, weaving the scientific observations into narratives that were easier to remember and transmit. You can almost hear the rhythmic chanting of star names, the stories of their journeys across the sky, echoing through the night. It's a reminder that knowledge isn't always confined to textbooks. Sometimes, it's sung into existence. You find yourself humming a silly jingle to remember the name of a new constellation, realizing that even in your modern mind, ancient learning techniques still find a way to resurface. You're also taught about the subtle clues the moon provides. While not as consistent as the stars, the moon's phase and position can offer additional navigational data, especially for determining east and west. Even the rising and setting points of the sun, though seemingly obvious, were carefully observed and used to calibrate their internal compass. The sun's arc across the sky changes with the seasons, and a skilled navigator would know these subtle variations, adapting their course accordingly. It's a dynamic system, constantly recalibrating, constantly adapting to the subtle dance of the cosmos. And as you lie on the deck, feeling the gentle rocking of the Vaca, watching the stars wheel overhead, you feel a profound sense of connection to these ancient mariners. They didn't just sail, they danced with the cosmos, reading its every whisper, trusting its every sign. It's a beautifully intricate ballet, and you're just learning the first few steps. You still can't tell the difference between Gemini and Ursa Major without a helpful diagram, but at least you're not pointing to the moon and calling it Jupiter. Small victories. Morning light again, and the ocean stretches endlessly before you. Today, your lesson turns to the more tangible, yet equally subtle clues of the sea, currents. You might think of currents as just broad, sweeping movements of water, but to a Polynesian navigator, they were a complex network of invisible rivers, each with its own character and purpose. You learn to read the subtle ripple patterns on the surface, the faint lines where two currents meet, the almost imperceptible changes in temperature that indicate a different water mass. It's like trying to detect a river in the middle of a vast lake, just by looking at the surface. You're told that different currents carry different types of marine life, different temperatures, and even different salinities. A change in the feel of the water, its temperature on your skin, or a sudden appearance of unfamiliar jellyfish could all be indicators of a new current, and thus, a shift in your position. You're taught how to use a drogue, a simple drag device to confirm the direction and speed of the current. It's a primitive but effective tool, simply a weighted object lowered into the water on a line, allowing the Vaca to drift with the current if desired, or to measure its exact movement. This wasn't guesswork, it was empirical observation. A mainstream historical fact is that the Polynesians had an incredibly sophisticated understanding of the major Pacific currents, including the equatorial currents and countercurrents, long before European cartographers began to map them. They knew where these currents flowed, their seasonal variations, and how to use them to their advantage for both propulsion and navigation. It's like knowing the entire subway system of a major city without ever having seen a map. You try to imagine charting these vast, invisible pathways through sheer observation and memory. It's truly mind-boggling. A quirky tidbit. Some navigators were said to be able to identify specific islands not just by the swells that rebounded from them, but also by the unique current patterns they created in their vicinity. Every island, even submerged seamounts, could create its own subtle disturbance in the surrounding currents, a unique signature. It's like every island had its own unique scent, but for water movements. They could feel these subtle differences in the Vaca's movement, detecting the presence of land even when it was far below the horizon. The scholarly debate often centers on the extent to which this was a universal skill among all navigators, or if it was a highly specialized ability possessed by only a few master navigators. Was it something everyone learned, or was it a gift, a talent, that only a chosen few developed to its highest degree? You suspect it was a spectrum, with some possessing an innate genius and others achieving mastery through relentless practice. You're also learning about the subtle indicators of deeper water versus shallower water. Beyond the color changes, the behavior of the waves themselves can offer clues. In deeper water, waves tend to be longer, more uniform, and less chaotic. As you approach shallower water, waves become shorter, steeper, and more unpredictable, often breaking earlier. It's a bit like watching a long, lazy dog suddenly become a frantic puppy as it nears its bowl. You feel the subtle shift in the vaca's motion, the quicker snap of the waves against the hull, and you know you're entering a new zone. These are the nuances that separate the casual observer from the master. It's the difference between seeing a blur and truly understanding the individual brushstrokes of a painting. The continuous feedback loop from these observations is what made their system so robust. Every piece of information, no matter how small, was cross-referenced and integrated into the larger picture. If the clouds indicated land in one direction and the swells indicated land in another, they would know to reevaluate, to look for a third or fourth piece of evidence that would resolve the ambiguity. It was a constant process of hypothesis and confirmation, a living, breathing scientific method. And as the day progresses, you find yourself becoming more attuned to these subtle whispers of the ocean. You're beginning to see the currents not as formless masses, but as distinct pathways, each with its own story to tell. You might even be starting to tell the difference between the friendly current that will take you where you want to go and the grumpy current that will just try to push you into the wrong part of the ocean. You laugh, a dry, salty laugh that echoes in the vastness. Your sense of humor is still intact, at least. As the afternoon sun starts its gentle decline, your attention turns to an often overlooked aspect of marine navigation, marine life. Beyond the birds and fish, there's a whole ecosystem that acts as an informal navigational chart. You're learning to identify different species of jellyfish, their movements and their presence. Some species are endemic to specific parts of the ocean or thrive in certain current systems. Finding a particular type of jellyfish far from its usual habitat can be a strong indicator of a current that has carried it, and thus, you far afield. It's like finding a street sign made of living, pulsing gelatin. You squint at the transparent forms drifting past, trying to recall the names and habits your instructors described. They all look like pretty blobs to you, but you know there's meaning in their gentle undulations. You're also taught about the distribution of certain types of seaweed or floating debris. While random bits of flotsam might not tell you much, the presence of specific types of marine plants, particularly those that grow near reefs or coastal areas, can be a definitive sign of nearby land. Even the color and consistency of the water can change slightly with the presence of algal blooms or plankton, which are often more prevalent near nutrient-rich coastal waters. It's like discovering a breadcrumb trail that only exists for a keen observer. You begin to understand that nothing in the ocean is truly random. Everything has a purpose, a place in the grand scheme of things. A mainstream historical fact is that the Polynesians were incredibly skilled at reading these subtle ecological clues. They understood the interconnectedness of marine life and their environment to a degree that modern science is only now fully appreciating. A quirky tidbit is the concept of oceanic islands, islands that are entirely formed by volcanic activity and rise directly from the deep ocean floor. The marine life around these islands, while still diverse, might be subtly different from the ecosystems around islands formed from continental landmasses. A highly experienced navigator might even be able to discern this difference based on the types of fish or crustaceans they encounter, providing a subtle clue about the geology of a distant landmass. It's a bit like being able to tell where someone grew up just by the way they say certain words. The scholarly debate sometimes questions the extent to which these extremely subtle ecological indicators were consciously used for navigation, or if they were more of an intuitive, subconscious reinforcement of other, more obvious clues. Were they actively looking for specific plankton, or was it just another piece of the ambient information they were processing? You're also learning about the behavior of land-based creatures that might venture out to sea. While less common, a very strong flyer, disoriented by a storm, might be found far from its usual haunts. Even insects carried by strong winds could be a rare but definitive sign. It's about being open to every possibility, every anomaly in the vastness of the ocean. It's a bit like finding a single rogue squirrel in the middle of the Sahara Desert. You definitely know something was up. The constant observation, the tireless vigilance, is what sets these navigators apart. They were never truly at rest. Their senses always extended, always searching for the next piece of the puzzle. It makes your average commute feel incredibly dull and predictable by comparison. No giant jellyfish to tell you where the next exit is. The cumulative effect of all these varied observations is what makes their system so resilient. If one clue is ambiguous, another will provide clarification. If a storm obscures the stars, the waves and the foam will still speak. It's a multi-layered system of redundancy, designed to function in all conditions. You begin to appreciate the elegance of this ancient knowledge, its adaptability, its profound reliance on the natural world. It wasn't about imposing their will on the ocean, but about aligning themselves with its rhythms, understanding its language, and becoming one with its vastness. And as the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and soft purples, you feel a new sense of peace settle over you. You're no longer just adrift. You're part of something larger, something ancient, something that connects you to the very pulse of the planet. And you realize with a slight grin that you've survived another day. Your internal clock is starting to feel more like a sundial and less like a digital display, which is definitely progress. Night has fully descended, but the lessons continue. You're now being taught about the subtle bioluminescence of the ocean, a phenomenon that might seem purely aesthetic, but can also offer navigational clues. You're told that certain types of plankton or marine organisms glow more intensely in certain areas, sometimes indicating changes in water temperature, salinity, or even the proximity of nutrient-rich upwellings that can be associated with land masses. It's like the ocean is blinking messages in the dark, and you're learning to read them. You stare into the inky blackness, trying to discern faint glows, ephemeral flashes of light that appear and disappear with the movement of the vaca. It's a truly magical sight, almost otherworldly, and yet it's another piece of the ancient puzzle. You also learn about the halo effect around islands at night. In areas with significant landmass, the atmosphere above the island can hold more moisture or be subtly affected by the land's temperature, creating a faint, almost imperceptible glow or haze against the backdrop of the darker night sky. It's not always visible, especially on cloudy nights, but on clear nights, it can be another subtle indicator of distant land. It's like seeing a faint halo around a distant candle, but the candle is an entire island. This isn't a direct reflection of light, but a subtle atmospheric phenomenon, requiring highly attuned eyes and a deep understanding of atmospheric physics, even if it wasn't articulated in modern scientific terms. A mainstream historical fact is that the Polynesians' understanding of atmospheric optics was incredibly advanced for their time, allowing them to interpret these subtle visual cues from great distances. A quirky tidbit about night navigation is the use of dead reckoning combined with continuous observation. This wasn't just about maintaining a fixed course. It was about constantly updating their mental map based on every single piece of information: the feel of the waves, the direction of the wind, the occasional glimpse of a star. They were continuously calculating their position and adjusting their course, even in the absence of clear visual landmarks. It's like doing complex mental arithmetic while also juggling flaming torches. The scholarly debate sometimes revolves around the computational abilities of these navigators. Were they performing complex mental calculations of speed, drift, and time? Or was it a more intuitive, almost artistic sense of their position? You suspect it was a blend of both, a remarkable fusion of logic and intuition. You're also taught to pay attention to the silence. In the open ocean, the soundscape is dominated by the rush of water against the hull and the whisper of the wind. But as you approach land, even a small island, the ambient sounds can subtly change. You might hear the distant cry of land birds, the faint roar of waves breaking on a distant reef, or even a subtle shift in the way the wind sounds as it passes over land. These are extremely subtle auditory cues, easily missed by the untrained ear. It's like trying to hear a pin drop in a busy city, but the pin is miles away and barely makes a sound. You strain your ears, trying to pick out any sound beyond the rhythmic slosh and creak of the vodka. So far, nothing but the reassuring sound of the ocean, which, honestly, is quite calming in itself. The cumulative wisdom, the constant cross-referencing of all these disparate elements, is what made their navigation so successful. No single cue was enough, but together, they formed an unbreakable chain of information. It was a holistic approach, a living embodiment of the scientific method long before the term was coined. And as the night deepens, and you find yourself rocking gently with the vodka, watching the faint glow of bioluminescence in the dark water, you feel a deep sense of respect for these ancient mariners. They didn't just sail. They were intimately connected to every aspect of their environment, reading its every sign, trusting its every whisper. It makes you feel incredibly reliant on your phone's GPS, and suddenly a little less confident about your next solo road trip. But then you remember they didn't have to worry about traffic jams. That's a win. The first light of dawn brings with it a new focus, the specific characteristics of land-approaching swells. You've learned about swells in general, but now you're honing in on the nuances that betray an island's presence. You're taught that as a swell, a long-period wave, approaches shallower water around an island, it undergoes a transformation. It slows down, its wavelength shortens, and its height increases. This change isn't always visually dramatic, but it's distinctly felt in the motion of the vodka. It's like feeling the subtle drag on a boat as it enters shallower water, but without actually touching the bottom. You feel the vodka beginning to ride higher on certain waves, the rhythm of its rise and fall subtly altering. This isn't just an uncomfortable ride, it's the ocean communicating. You also learn about the effect of breaking waves. Even if you can't see the island, you can often hear the distant roar of waves breaking on a reef or coastline. And more importantly, these breaking waves generate their own set of smaller waves, or chop, that travel outwards from the land. This localized chop, often traveling in a different direction to the prevailing swells, is a strong indicator of nearby land. It's like hearing the distant crash of thunder B. For you see the storm, you strain your ears, trying to discern the subtle, underlying rumble beneath the constant slosh of the ocean. A mainstream historical fact is that this ability to detect and interpret refracted and reflected swells, and the chop generated by breaking waves, was a cornerstone of their blind navigation techniques, allowing them to pinpoint islands that were still far below the visual horizon. A quirky tidbit about this is the feeling of the waves. Some navigators described it as a change in the texture of the water, a subtle difference in how the vaca responded to the swells. It was a visceral, almost intuitive understanding, developed through years of being constantly immersed in the oceanic environment. It's like a master carpenter being able to tell the type of wood just by the feel of its grain. The scholarly debate often centers on the teaching methodologies. How exactly was this highly sensory, intuitive knowledge transmitted? Was it through direct imitation, through prolonged exposure, or through specific exercises designed to hone these subtle perceptions? You can imagine endless hours spent on the water, simply feeling the waves, guided by a master. It's a method of learning that contrasts sharply with your own classroom-based education, and you find yourself wondering which is more effective. You're also taught about the influence of islands on local weather patterns. Even small islands can create their own microclimates. You might notice a localized increase in humidity, a change in cloud formation directly over a particular area, or even a slight temperature difference in the air. These are not grand, obvious weather events, but subtle shifts that hint at the presence of a landmass disrupting the vast homogeneity of the open ocean. It's like finding a small, warm pocket of air in a generally cool room. You take a deep breath, trying to detect any change in the subtle dampness of the air. It's a constant process of active observation, a reminder that the world is always speaking if you only know how to listen. The constant cross-referencing of all these observations is key. If you feel the swells changing, and you notice a subtle shift in the wind, and you catch a faint scent on the air, all pointing in the same direction, your confidence in approaching land grows exponentially. It's not about one magical clue, but about building a robust case based on multiple lines of evidence. And as the day continues, you feel a growing sense of anticipation. The vast emptiness of the ocean is slowly, imperceptibly giving way to the subtle whispers of land. You're beginning to feel like a detective, piecing together clues from an invisible crime scene. Except the crime scene is the ocean, and the crime is the hidden island. And the reward is survival, which, all things considered, is a pretty good reward. You might even crack a small, tired smile. Mid-morning, and the sun now sits comfortably in the sky. Your lesson today delves into the fascinating world of deep ocean swells and how they interact with distant, unseen land. You're learning that swells, those long, rolling waves generated by distant weather systems, travel across vast stretches of ocean with incredible persistence. They are the ocean's memory, carrying information from far-off shores. When these swells encounter an island, even hundreds of miles away and well below the horizon, they don't just disappear. Instead, they refract, bend around the island, and create unique interference patterns. It's like throwing a rock into a pond and watching the ripples meet, but on an oceanic scale. You're taught to feel the subtle, intersecting rhythms of these different swell sets against the hull of the vaca, discerning patterns that reveal the presence and even the general direction of a distant landmass. You also learn about swell windows. Because islands disrupt swells, there are often areas downwind of an island where the swells are noticeably calmer or less consistent than in the open ocean. This creates a kind of shadow or window in the swell pattern that can be detected by a skilled navigator. It's like finding a calm spot in a turbulent river, hinting at an obstruction upstream. You feel the vaca glide through a slightly smoother patch of water, and your instructor points out the subtle change in the rhythm of the waves. A mainstream historical fact is that this ability to detect and interpret these subtle swell patterns was a crucial element of Polynesian blind navigation, allowing them to find islands that were entirely out of sight and even out of range of bird flights. It was a testament to their profound understanding of wave mechanics, long before formal physics. A quirky tidbit is the concept of wave pilots, or individuals who were so attuned to the swells that they could lie down on the deck of the vaca, and by feeling the subtle motions, accurately determine their position relative to uns. In Islands. It was a full-body, almost spiritual immersion in the ocean's language. Imagine trying to navigate by simply lying down and letting the vibrations guide you. The scholarly debate sometimes questions the universality of this specific skill. Was it common among all navigators, or a rare gift possessed by only a few exceptionally sensitive individuals? You can imagine the skepticism from a modern scientist observing such a claim, and yet the historical accounts are consistent. It speaks to a level of sensory perception that is difficult for modern, often desensitized, humans to fully grasp. You're also taught about the subtle shifts in cloud formations that occur even at extreme distances from land. While island clouds are a strong indicator of nearby land, even the presence of certain types of high-altitude clouds, or a tendency for clouds to form and dissipate in a specific pattern, can be influenced by the presence of a large landmass, even if it's hundreds of miles away. It's a very subtle effect, a whisper in the sky, but one that a trained eye can interpret. It's like seeing a barely visible ripple in the fabric of the sky, indicating a disturbance far below. You squint, trying to see the invisible threads connecting the distant clouds to a hypothetical island. The constant vigilance, the relentless observation of every single detail, no matter how small, is what distinguishes these navigators. They were living, breathing data collectors, constantly processing information from every direction, above, below, and all around. It was a system built on humility and respect for the natural world, a recognition that the answers were always there, if only they knew how to look and listen. And as the day wears on, and the sun begins its slow descent towards the horizon, you feel a growing sense of respect for the sheer intellectual and physical demands of this ancient art. You're not just sailing, you're engaging in a profound conversation with the ocean, a dialogue that has been ongoing for thousands of years. And you haven't fallen overboard yet, which is a major victory in your book. Your internal monologue is starting to sound a lot more like a calm, reassuring whisper, which is good. The sun is nearing its peak again, and the subtle dance of light and water is your next lesson. You're learning about the reflections in the clouds, not just the bright sheen from lagoons, but the more diffused light that reflects from general landmass. It's an atmospheric phenomenon where the land, even if unseen, can affect the ambient light and moisture in the air above it, subtly altering the way clouds appear. You're taught to look for a faint, generalized brightening of the sky in a particular direction, a subtle luminescence that indicates land is altering the atmosphere. It's like seeing a faint glow in the distance at night, but during the day and from a reflection. This isn't a direct reflection like a mirror, but a more pervasive, subtle atmospheric scattering of light. You also learn about the Cape-Coo, a term referring to the loom of an island, the faint silhouette or atmospheric distortion that can be seen on the horizon long before the island itself becomes clearly visible. This isn't always a direct image, but sometimes a subtle mirage effect, a blurring or shimmering that indicates a landmass affecting the air temperature and density above it. It's like seeing a distorted image in a funhouse mirror, but the mirror is the entire atmosphere. You squint at the distant horizon, trying to pick out any anomaly in the perfectly smooth line where sky meets sea. A mainstream historical fact is that Polynesian navigators were so skilled at detecting these subtle atmospheric cues that they could discern landmasses from distances of 30 to 50 miles, sometimes even more, depending on atmospheric conditions. This far exceeded the visual range of the average person at sea level. A quirky tidbit is the concept of refracted starlight. In very calm conditions, it was said that navigators could sometimes detect the subtle refraction of starlight caused by the presence of a distant landmass. The land's atmosphere would slightly bend the light from a low-lying star, causing it to appear subtly distorted or to glimmer differently. It's like looking through a faint ripple in a window pane. This is an extremely subtle phenomenon, almost on the edge of perception, and historians still debate its practical application. Was it a consistent tool, or a rare and fleeting confirmation for the most sensitive navigators? It's a bit like trying to read a fortune cookie message through a very thick fog. The scholarly debate often centers on the training and selection of navigators. Was it an inherited role, passed down through specific families, or was it a meritocracy where the most talented and dedicated individuals were chosen? It's likely a combination, with certain lineages holding the knowledge, but with continuous testing and validation of individuals. Imagine an academy where instead of textbooks, your final exam involves navigating hundreds of miles by only using the whispers of the ocean. It paints a vivid picture of a society deeply invested in practical knowledge and generational wisdom. You find yourself wondering if you could ever pass such a demanding examination, probably not without a very long nap first. You're also taught about the subtle changes in wave frequency and height that can indicate the presence of underwater reefs or seamounts, even if they don't break the surface. These submerged features still disrupt the flow of ocean swells, creating unique wave patterns that can be felt and observed. It's like feeling the subtle rumble of an underground train, even if you can't see it. The constant interaction between the deep ocean and the shallow structures creates a dynamic, ever-changing map on the surface. And as the day progresses and the sun begins its slow descent, you feel your senses becoming sharper, more attuned to the nuances of the ocean. You're starting to see the world through a new lens, one that prioritizes observation, intuition, and an intimate connection with the natural world. It's a bit like suddenly realizing your pet dog has been trying to tell you something really important for years, and you're just now starting to understand. It's a surprisingly profound realization. The afternoon is easing into evening, and your lessons now focus on the often overlooked nuances of bird behavior. You've already learned that birds can point to land, but now you're delving deeper into the specifics. You're taught to identify different species of seabirds and understand their feeding patterns and flight ranges. For example, certain types of terns or noddies tend to stay closer to land, only venturing out a limited distance, while others, like albatrosses, can spend months at sea. Observing the types of birds you encounter and their general direction of flight can provide crucial information about your proximity to specific types of islands or coastlines. It's like having a living, feathered biodiversity map. You try to remember the various bird calls and their associated flight patterns, a mnemonic challenge that feels more suited to a wildlife documentary than a survival lesson. You also learn about the fish feeding frenzies that can be indicative of nearby reefs or shallow water. Where there are reefs, there's often an abundance of smaller fish, which in turn attract larger predatory fish and seabirds. Observing a sudden increase in bird activity, particularly birds diving and feeding, or a visible concentration of fish near the surface, can be a strong clue to the presence of an unseen landmass or a rich fishing ground, which often correlates with islands. It's like seeing a sudden traffic jam in the middle of nowhere. Something important must be happening. A mainstream historical fact is that Polynesian navigators were expert fishermen, and their knowledge of marine ecology was deeply intertwined with their navigational skills. Their ability to find abundant fishing grounds was often a direct result of their ability to locate hidden islands. A quirky tidbit is the concept of bird lines. Navigators would sometimes observe birds flying out from a known island in distinct lines or patterns, almost like invisible highways in the sky. By recognizing these patterns and understanding where they originated, they could trace them back to the source island. It's like seeing a flock of birds forming a subtle arrow pointing home. The scholarly debate sometimes questions the precision of these bird lines. Were they truly consistent and reliable, or did they require a significant degree of interpretation and environmental context? You can imagine the challenges of relying on such fleeting visual cues, especially in varying weather conditions. It's a bit like trying to read a very long, very complicated sentence that's constantly being blown around by the wind. You're also taught about the effect of specific types of marine vegetation on the color of the water. While general algal blooms can affect water color, certain types of sea grasses or specific forms of macroalgae thrive in coastal areas and can subtly alter the water's hue or clarity. This requires an incredibly keen eye and a deep knowledge of local marine botany. It's like being able to tell the difference between different types of grass from miles away. You stare intently at the shifting colors of the ocean, trying to discern the subtle green or brown tinges that might indicate a hidden reef. Your eyes are starting to feel a bit strained from all this intense observation. The continuous layering of information, the constant seeking of multiple confirmations, is what made their system so robust and reliable. They didn't put all their eggs in one basket. They had a dozen different baskets, all cross-referencing each other. It was a testament to their patience, their intellectual rigor, and their unwavering commitment to understanding their environment. And as the sun finally dips below the horizon, painting the sky in a final, fiery flourish, you feel a new appreciation for the quiet persistence of these ancient voyagers. They weren't just sailing from one point to another. They were engaged in a continuous, profound dialogue with the ocean, a conversation that echoed across generations. And you realize, with a slight nod, that you're slowly but surely learning to speak its language. You're not quite fluent, but at least you're not just babbling anymore. Night falls, but the ocean's subtle narrative continues. Your focus now shifts to the elusive yet crucial role of phosphorescence. You've learned about general bioluminescence, but phosphorescence refers specifically to the light emitted by certain organisms when agitated, often by the movement of the vaca through the water. You're taught that the intensity and pattern of this glow can change near land. For instance, in areas with strong currents around an island, the water might be more turbulent, causing more organisms to glow, creating a brighter, more widespread phosphorescence. It's like the ocean is painting with light, and you're learning to read the brushstrokes. You lean over the side, watching the mesmerizing trails of light created by the vaca's passage, trying to discern any anomalies in their shimmering dance. You also learn about the dark water phenomenon. In certain conditions, particularly on moonless nights, the landmass of an island, even when far below the horizon, can create a subtle area of darker sky above it due to the absence of reflected light from the land. This is incredibly subtle and requires perfect conditions and highly attuned vision, but for a master navigator, it could be another clue. It's like seeing a slight void in the starry canvas, a hint of something blocking the light. This is distinct from the halo effect, which implied a glow. This is the opposite, a subtle darkening. A mainstream historical fact is that the Polynesians' ability to discern these incredibly subtle optical phenomena, like dark water and the loom of islands, was a key factor in their success over vast ocean distances. Their eyes were trained to pick up variations that modern city dwellers would never even register. A quirky tidbit is the concept of magnetic anomalies. While not a conscious use of magnetism in the way a compass works, some researchers suggest that highly sensitive navigators might have subconsciously detected subtle shifts in the Earth's magnetic field as they approached large landmasses or underwater volcanic structures. This is a highly speculative area, and historians still debate its feasibility, as the magnetic shifts would be incredibly subtle and difficult to distinguish from other environmental noise. It's like trying to feel the difference between two almost identical vibrations with your eyes closed. You try to imagine how such a sense would even manifest. It sounds like something out of a science fiction novel. And yet, who knows what latent senses we've lost over time? The scholarly debate often considers the role of supersenses, or heightened perception, in Polynesian navigation. Were these navigators simply exceptionally observant, or did their constant immersion in the natural world lead to a true enhancement of their sensory abilities beyond what is considered normal? You find yourself believing that a deep connection to nature can indeed sharpen the senses, making you aware of nuances that are otherwise overlooked. It's not magic, but a profound attunement. It's a bit like a musician who can hear the most subtle imperfections in a melody. You're also taught about the subtle smell of fresh water carried on the wind from certain islands, particularly larger ones with significant rainfall and rivers. This isn't the smell of a rainstorm at sea, but a distinct, earthy, almost sweet scent of land-based water. It's a very elusive scent, easily masked by the prevailing sea air, but a trained nose can pick it out. You breathe deeply, trying to discern any hint of earth or river amongst the pervasive salt. So far, all you smell is the dampness of the ocean, which, honestly, is what you'd expect. But you keep trying, reminding yourself that learning to truly perceive means pushing the boundaries of your own senses. And as the night wears on and the stars wheel overhead, you feel a growing connection to these ancient voyagers, their profound knowledge, and their unwavering trust in the whispers of the wild. You're starting to understand that the ocean isn't just a physical space. It's a living, breathing entity, constantly communicating, and you're beginning to hear its story. The pre-dawn chill permeates the air as your lesson turns to the subtle art of interpreting reflections on the water's surface. You've already considered reflections in clouds, but now you're focusing on the direct interaction between light, land, and water. You're taught to look for faint, almost imperceptible reflections of a distant landmass on the calm surface of the sea, particularly at dawn or dusk when the light is low and angled. It's not a clear image, but a subtle shimmer, a distortion, or a difference in the way the light interacts with the water in a particular direction. It's like seeing a very faint ghost image of something that isn't quite there, but which hints at what is. This phenomenon relies on perfect conditions, calm seas, specific light angles, and highly trained eyes. You also learn about the bow wave effect around islands. As swells approach an island, they slow down and refract, creating a subtle bow wave or pressure ridge on the ocean's surface that extends outwards from the island. This isn't a breaking wave, but a barely perceptible rise in the water level, a subtle bulge that can be detected by a sensitive navigator. It's like feeling the slight ripple ahead of a moving object in water, but the object is an entire island, and the ripple is incredibly subtle. A mainstream historical fact is that this knowledge of wave behavior around islands, including the bow wave effect, was so profound that it formed the basis of the intricate stick charts, which represented these wave patterns rather than literal coastlines. A quirky tidbit is the concept of land-affected swells having a distinct feel to them, almost a different viscosity. Navigators describe the water near islands as feeling thicker or heavier due to the complex interaction of currents, reflected swells, and perhaps even the slight change in water temperature. This is highly subjective and incredibly difficult to quantify, but it speaks to the profound sensory integration these navigators possessed. It's like being able to tell the difference between two types of silk just by the way they feel to the touch. The scholarly debate sometimes questions the scientific basis of such subjective claims. Was it genuinely a discernible physical difference, or a highly developed intuition that manifested as a feeling? You suspect it was a complex interplay of both, where intuition was built upon years of unconscious data processing. You're also taught about the specific behavior of clouds formed by thermal convection over land. These clouds often have flatter bases and more distinct, sometimes even vertical, development compared to purely oceanic clouds. Their edges might be sharper, or they might appear to be fixed in place for longer periods, even when the overall weather pattern is moving. It's a subtle visual cue that indicates a steady source of rising warm air, a landmass. It's like seeing a perfectly shaped cumulus cloud in an otherwise chaotic sky, knowing it's tied to something solid below. You scan the emerging cloudscape, trying to discern these subtle differences, to see the invisible anchor points that betray an island's presence. The ongoing process of assimilation, of integrating all these various data points into a coherent picture, is what makes this navigation so profound. It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about developing an intimate, almost symbiotic relationship with the environment. Every sense is engaged, every subtle change noted, every anomaly investigated. And as the sun finally breaches the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues, you feel a deeper understanding taking root within you. You're no longer just a passive passenger. You're an active participant in the ancient dance of discovery, and you realize with a quiet sense of triumph that you're starting to see the invisible, to hear the silent whispers of the ocean. It's a skill you never thought you'd possess, and it's surprisingly empowering. You feel a bit like a superhero, but instead of capes, you have incredibly sensitive toes. Mid-morning on the Vaca, and your lessons now focus on the subtle, often overlooked, patterns of wave refraction. You've heard about swells bending around islands, but now you're learning to identify the specific angles and curvatures that reveal not just the presence, but the general shape and even the size of a distant landmass. You're taught that longer, more uniform swells will refract differently around a large, broad island compared to a small, narrow atoll. It's like reading the subtle distortion in a lens to determine the object behind it. You feel the vodka shift and sway in a new rhythm, a subtle change in the ocean's pulse that indicates a change in the underwater topography. It's an incredibly precise art, requiring immense sensitivity to the nuances of wave mechanics. You also learn about the conflicting swell patterns that occur when swells from different directions meet and interact around an island. This can create areas of choppy, confused water or specific cross patterns that are unique to the island's location relative to Preva. Island swells. It's like two different musical compositions playing over each other, creating a unique harmony or cacophony that signals a specific location. You squint at the water, trying to pick out the subtle chaos in certain areas, the faint ripples that crisscross each other in an unnatural way. A mainstream historical fact is that the Polynesians' understanding of these complex wave interactions was so advanced that they could often deduce the presence of an island simply by feeling the pattern of swells on their bodies, even while immersed in the water. This was an ultimate test of their sensory acuity. A quirky tidbit is the concept of star paths that were not just about the rising and setting points of stars, but also about the subtle visual tracks they left on the horizon as they traveled. Navigators would visualize these tracks, effectively drawing invisible lines across the night sky, and these lines would intersect with the bow wave, or dark water signs of distant islands. It's like a cosmic connect-the-dots game, where the dots are stars and the lines lead to land. The scholarly debate sometimes questions the practicality of observing such ephemeral visual phenomena consistently. Was it a conscious technique, or more of a metaphorical way of describing their highly attuned visual memory? You suspect it was a blend of both, a powerful visualization technique rooted in profound observation. You're also taught about the subtle sound cues from distant land, beyond just breaking waves. For instance, the sound of certain types of wind passing over cliffs or through valleys on a large island can create unique hums or whistles that carry across the water. These are incredibly faint, easily masked by the omnipresent ocean sounds, but a trained ear might pick them out, especially on a very calm night. It's like hearing a barely audible whisper in a roaring stadium. You close your eyes, trying to filter out the general ocean noise, focusing on any distant, unnatural sounds. All you hear is your stomach rumbling. Clearly, your ears are more attuned to hunger than land masses. The cumulative intelligence of their system, where every single observation reinforces or modifies another, is truly astonishing. It's not about relying on one sense, but about weaving together a rich tapestry of sensory information, each thread contributing to the overall picture. And as the day wears on, and the sun begins its slow descent, you feel a growing sense of wonder at the sheer human capacity for ingenuity when stripped of modern technology. You're beginning to see the ocean not as a barrier, but as a vast, interconnected information system, constantly broadcasting its secrets. And you, a humble student, are slowly learning to decode its messages. You're still not sure you could lead a voyage yourself, but at least you're no longer mistaking a passing dolphin for a mermaid. That's a significant win. As dusk approaches, painting the sky in fiery hues, your lesson turns to the subtle art of interpreting cloud breaks or gaps. You've learned about island clouds, But now you're taught that even in areas with widespread cloud cover, the presence of an island can create a subtle break or thinning in the cloud layer directly above it. This is due to the island's influence on air currents, causing a disruption in the continuous cloud formation. It's like seeing a small hole in a blanket, hinting at something underneath. This isn't always a dramatic clearing, but a subtle area where the clouds are less dense, or where their formation patterns are slightly altered. You find yourself scanning the horizon, looking for any subtle discontinuity in the cloud blanket. You also learn about the lenticular clouds that can sometimes form over islands with significant elevation. These lens-shaped clouds, often very distinct and stationary, are formed by stable, moist air flowing over a mountain or hill. Their presence, even if the mountain itself is unseen, is a definitive sign of land. It's like seeing a giant, ethereal UFO hovering above a distant, invisible landmass. A mainstream historical fact is that the observation of specific cloud formations, like lenticular clouds, was a well-known indicator of land for many ancient mariners, not just the Polynesians, highlighting the universality of these natural cues. A quirky tidbit is the concept of oceanic mirages that are not always due to distant islands, but sometimes caused by temperature inversions over the open ocean. These mirages could mimic land, creating false hopes and leading navigators astray. A skilled navigator would need to distinguish between these true mirages and the atmospheric effects caused by actual land. It's like trying to tell the difference between a real oasis and a shimmering optical illusion in the desert. The scholarly debate often revolves around how navigators distinguished these false positives. Was it through cross-referencing with other cues, or simply through extensive experience and an understanding of the ocean's fickle nature? You suspect it was a combination of constant verification and a healthy dose of skepticism. You're also taught about the subtle shifts in wind temperature that can indicate proximity to land. Land, especially large islands, heats up and cools down at a different rate than the ocean. This can create subtle temperature gradients in the air that are carried by the wind. A sudden, almost imperceptible warmth or coolness on your skin, even far from shore, could be a hint. It's like feeling a faint change in the breeze as you walk from a shaded area into sunlight. You try to focus on the feel of the wind against your face, discerning any change in its subtle embrace. So far, it just feels like wind, but you persist, knowing that every sense is a potential guide. The constant process of learning, adapting, and refining their techniques is what made Polynesian navigation a living, evolving art. It wasn't a static set of rules, but a dynamic engagement with the environment, constantly updated and improved with each voyage. And as the sun finally dips below the horizon and the stars begin to emerge, you feel a new layer of understanding settling within you. You're starting to grasp the incredible depth of their knowledge, the profound respect they held for the natural world, and their unwavering trust in its subtle whispers. You're not just learning history, you're experiencing it, feeling its ancient rhythms resonate within your very being. And you realize, with a sense of quiet awe, that navigating by these signs isn't just possible, it's a profound and beautiful way to move through the world. You might even find yourself preferring it to your phone's demanding beeps. Almost. Night has fully embraced the Vaca, and your lesson turns to the incredibly subtle art of interpreting the smell of the air near land at night. While you've touched on this before, tonight you're focusing on the nuances only detectable in darkness. You're taught that in the absence of sunlight, the subtle atmospheric differences caused by land become even more pronounced for a sensitive nose. You might pick up the faint, earthy scent of damp soil, the distinctive aroma of specific types of vegetation, or even the subtle smell of smoke from a distant fire. It's like the land is breathing, and you're learning to inhale its secrets. You breathe deeply, trying to discern anything beyond the omnipresent saltiness of the ocean and the faint smell of fish. It's incredibly challenging, but you persist, straining your olfactory senses to their limits. You also learn about the land breeze effect. At night, land cools faster than the ocean. This difference in temperature can create a localized breeze that flows from the land out to sea. Feeling a faint, consistent breeze coming from a direction contrary to the prevailing wind could be a strong indicator of nearby land. It's like a gentle, invisible hand pushing you towards shore. A mainstream historical fact is that the Polynesians understood these diurnal wind shifts and used them strategically, sometimes sailing with the land breeze in the morning to gain distance from an island, or using it at night to approach. This sophisticated understanding of local weather patterns was crucial for precise navigation. A quirky tidbit is the concept of dream navigation, where some master navigators claim to receive guidance or insights in their dreams, almost as if the ocean itself was communicating with them. This isn't a scientific method in the modern sense, but it speaks to the deep psychological and spiritual connection these navigators had with their environment. Was it genuine mystical insight, or simply their subconscious processing of vast amounts of environmental data collected during waking hours? The scholarly debate sometimes questions the role of such non-empirical methods in their overall navigational success. You find yourself wondering if your own dreams hold any hidden navigational clues, probably just what you had for dinner last night. You're also taught about the subtle shifts in the sound of breaking waves on different types of coastlines. A sandy beach will produce a different sound than a rocky shore or a coral reef. A skilled navigator could discern these differences, providing another piece of the puzzle about the nature of the approaching land. It's like being able to tell the difference between a drum solo on a snare drum versus a bass drum, just by the sound. You close your eyes, trying to isolate the subtle variations in the rhythmic crash of the waves against the vaca, hoping to pick up a distant, unfamiliar sound. The relentless pursuit of information, the continuous refinement of their senses, is what defined these navigators. They were living, breathing instruments, finely tuned to the pulse of the planet. And as the night deepens and the stars wheel overhead, you feel a profound respect for their unwavering dedication. They weren't just searching for land, they were searching for truth, for understanding in the boundless expanse of the ocean. And you, a mere novice, are starting to feel the tug of that same ancient curiosity. You might even find yourself wishing for a bit more fog, just so you can practice your newfound dark water perception. Just kidding. Mostly. The first hint of false dawn, that subtle lightening in the eastern sky, brings your next lesson. The precise interpretation of oceanic birds returning to their roosts. You've learned about birds pointing to land, but now you're focusing on the critical window of dawn and dusk. You're taught that certain species, after feeding at sea throughout the night or day, will consistently return to a known roosting island. Observing their flight path, particularly their direction and the altitude at which they fly, can be an incredibly precise indicator of a distant landmass. It's like a natural homing beacon, albeit one made of feathers and instinct. You squint your eyes, trying to discern the faint silhouettes of birds against the lightening sky, their tireless wings beating a path towards an unseen sanctuary. You also learn about the cloud-bird relationship. Often, the same thermal currents that create island clouds also provide updrafts that birds utilize for soaring, making their flight paths even more discernible. So, if you see a developing island cloud in one direction and birds flying consistently in that same direction, it provides powerful confirmation. It's a multi-layered verification, where two seemingly separate phenomena combine to form an undeniable truth. A mainstream historical fact is that the knowledge of bird behavior, including their roosting patterns and feeding grounds, was meticulously observed and passed down through generations, forming a vital part of the Polynesian navigational curriculum. They even had specific names for different types of bird formations that indicated various distances to land. A quirky tidbit is the concept of fishing ground indicators. Sometimes, a consistent gathering of seabirds over a particular area of open ocean, even without visible land, could indicate an underwater seamount or a rich fishing ground. While not directly a land indicator, these areas often had unique current patterns or marine life that could be part of a larger navigational context. It's like finding a natural rest stop in the middle of a vast, empty highway. The scholarly debate sometimes centers on the extent to which these fishing ground indicators were consciously used for primary navigation, or if they were more of a secondary, opportunistic source of information. Were they actively seeking out these rich areas, or just taking advantage when they encountered them? You suspect a pragmatic blend of both. You're also taught about the subtle sea sheen, or land sheen, that can appear on the water's surface near land. This isn't foam, but a faint, almost oily or glassy appearance caused by the interaction of fresh water runoff, decaying organic matter, or even just changes in water temperature near a landmass. It's a very subtle visual cue, requiring specific light conditions and incredibly keen eyesight. It's like noticing a faint, almost invisible film on the surface of your coffee. You try to discern any subtle difference in the texture or reflectivity of the water, a task that feels incredibly elusive in the vastness. The culmination of all these skills, the seamless integration of visual, auditory, olfactory, and tactile information, is what made Polynesian navigation such an extraordinary feat. It wasn't about relying on a single tool, but about becoming the tool itself, an extension of the natural world. And as the sun finally breaches the horizon, painting the sky in a glorious symphony of colors, you feel a profound sense of privilege at having glimpsed this ancient wisdom. You're starting to understand that true navigation isn't about controlling nature, but about harmonizing with it, becoming one with its intricate rhythms. And you realize, with a quiet sense of awe, that you've come a long way from simply pointing your car at the nearest Starbucks, though you still wouldn't mind a coffee right now. The sun is now well into its ascent, and your final practical lesson focuses on the elusive, almost spiritual, feel of the land approaching. This isn't about specific visual or auditory cues, but an overarching sensory experience, a profound shift in the very atmosphere. You're taught that as you near a significant landmass, the air itself can feel different, perhaps a subtle increase in humidity, a change in the subtle scent of the air that's not quite discernible but hints at something new, or even a very slight change in air temperature. It's like a quiet hum, a change in the background noise of the universe that indicates a new presence. This is the synthesis of all you. Our previous lessons, where individual clues merge into an undeniable, holistic sense of proximity. You also learn about the subtle pulse of the ocean near land. Beyond specific wave patterns, the entire rhythm of the sea can feel different, a change in the underlying energy that permeates the vaca. It's a deeper, more resonant vibration that seems to come from beneath the surface, almost as if the land itself is radiating a subtle energy. It's like feeling the subtle tremor of a distant earthquake, but instead of danger, it signifies hope. A mainstream historical fact is that this feeling, or intuitive sense of land, was often described by master navigators, indicating a level of sensory attunement that transcended simple observation and moved into the realm of profound, almost unconscious perception. It was the culmination of years, even decades, of immersion in the oceanic environment. A quirky tidbit is the concept of cloud shadows on the water, not just the shadows cast by specific clouds, but the subtle, darker areas on the ocean surface caused by the general influence of a large landmass on the overlying atmosphere. These shadows could subtly alter the appearance of the water, making it appear darker or less reflective in certain areas. It's a highly ephemeral visual cue, easily missed, but for a trained eye, it could be another piece of the puzzle. The scholarly debate sometimes questions the extent to which this was a conscious navigational tool versus a subliminal reinforcement of other observations. Was it something they actively looked for, or just another piece of the ambient information their brains were processing? You're also taught about the psychological aspect of prolonged navigation, the mental fortitude, the resilience, and the unwavering faith required to sail for weeks or months across an empty ocean, relying solely on these subtle cues. It wasn't just a technical skill, it was a profound spiritual and mental discipline. The navigators had to maintain focus, remain optimistic, and trust their observations implicitly, even when faced with uncertainty. It's like running a marathon blindfolded, relying on every single whisper and subtle shift in the air to guide your way. You find yourself feeling a newfound respect for their mental toughness, a quality often overlooked in the discussion of their practical skills. The absolute mastery of their environment, the seamless integration of every single natural phenomenon into a coherent navigational system, is what truly sets the Polynesian navigators apart. They didn't conquer the ocean. They understood it, they respected it, and they learned to dance with its rhythms. And as the day wears on and the sun continues its relentless climb, you feel a profound shift within you. You're no longer just a passive observer. You're a participant in this ancient art, feeling the subtle whispers of the wind, seeing the elusive patterns in the clouds, and sensing the profound pulse of the ocean beneath you. You're not just learning history, you're embodying it, becoming a tiny link in a chain of human ingenuity that stretches back thousands of years. You might even feel a little bit taller, standing on the deck of this vaca, feeling the vastness of the ocean, and knowing, truly knowing, that you are part of its timeless story. You probably still couldn't tie all those fancy knots, but at least you're not accidentally steering into a hurricane. Progress. The sun is directly overhead, casting a blinding glare on the water. Your journey, a condensed immersion into the heart of Polynesian navigation, culminates in understanding the synergy of all these intricate details. You've touched on clouds, sea foam, swells, currents, marine life, celestial bodies, and subtle atmospheric shifts. Now, you're realizing that no single one of these elements functions in isolation. They are a symphony of information, a constant, interlocking dialogue between nature and the trained human mind. A master navigator wasn't just looking at one cloud or feeling one swell. They were synthesizing hundreds of data points simultaneously, almost unconsciously, to build a dynamic, real-time map in their minds. It's like conducting an orchestra where every instrument is a natural phenomenon, and the harmony guides you home. You also learn about the importance of redundancy and confirmation. If the birds were flying in one direction, but the swells were indicating something else, a good navigator would know to hold off on a definitive decision, seeking more clues until a consistent picture emerged. This wasn't about rushing to conclusions. It was about patient observation and meticulous cross-referencing. It's like having multiple witnesses at a crime scene and patiently piecing together their accounts to find the truth. A mainstream historical fact is that this highly integrated system allowed Polynesian navigators to explore and settle an area of the Pacific larger than all the continents combined, a feat that remains one of the greatest achievements in human exploration. A quirky tidbit is the concept of reverse navigation, where navigators would spend considerable time studying the prevailing winds, swells, and currents around their home islands before setting out on a voyage. They were essentially imprinting the feel of their home into their minds, so they could recognize it upon return. It's like creating a mental blueprint of your house so you can find your way back in the dark. The scholarly debate sometimes questions the extent of conscious pre-planning involved in these reverse navigation techniques. Was it a formal training exercise, or a natural byproduct of living in constant communion with their environment? You suspect it was a deeply ingrained habit, almost a form of muscle memory for the mind. You're also taught about the crucial role of collective knowledge. Navigation was rarely, if ever, a solitary endeavor. Knowledge was passed down through generations, refined by collective experience, and held as a precious communal resource. Master navigators trained apprentices, often from a young age, imbuing them with not just the technical skills, but the philosophy, the respect, and the deep connection to the ocean that was essential for survival. It's like a scientific community, but without the internet or published papers, relying instead on direct transmission and shared wisdom. You feel a profound sense of connection to this lineage of knowledge, knowing that you're experiencing a tiny fraction of what countless generations perfected. The sheer courage required for these voyages cannot be overstated. To set out into the vast, unknown ocean, relying only on the subtle whispers of nature and the accumulated wisdom of your ancestors, is an act of incredible bravery. It's a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity, its insatiable curiosity, and its profound capacity for adaptation and learning. And as the sun hangs high in the sky, marking the peak of your imaginative journey, you feel a deep sense of calm, a peace that comes from understanding a world where humanity and nature were in perfect, symbiotic harmony. You are no longer just listening to a story. You are living it, feeling the ancient rhythms in your very core. You understand, with a clarity that transcends words, how Polynesians navigated using clouds and sea foam, and so much more. And you close your eyes, feeling the gentle sway of the vaca, knowing that this journey, though imaginary, has changed the way you see the world forever. You didn't even have to pack a bag. Perfect. So, as the last rays of our imagined sun dip below the horizon, and the gentle rocking of our vaca slows to a nearly imperceptible sway, let your mind drift. Feel the soft, warm breeze that carries the faint scent of distant, unseen islands, a promise whispered on the air. The vast ocean, once a daunting emptiness, now feels like a comforting embrace, a timeless cradle. Let the subtle, rhythmic sound of the waves, a gentle hush against the hull, lull you deeper into relaxation. There's nothing to worry about here. No urgent directions, no pressing decisions. The stars, those countless diamond-like pinpricks in the velvet blackness, are patiently guiding us, not to a destination, but simply through the peaceful expanse of the night. You are safe, suspended between the gentle vastness above and the calm, reassuring depths below. Every ripple, every faint glow of phosphorescence, every soft whisper of the wind is a lullaby, a comforting reminder of the profound wisdom and endless patience of the world. Just breathe. Let your thoughts soften, unfurl, and drift away like the wisps of a daytime cloud. The journey continues even in rest, a gentle, timeless flow. You are part of this ancient rhythm, held securely in the embrace of the sleeping ocean. Sleep well and dream of the quiet wisdom of the waves.